Welcome to the second part of our two-part interview with Coach Brian Whetten, where we talk about tools and practices to help people successfully navigate the path to waking up with integrity.
How do we think about getting to that mining process? How would
Yep.
you, how do
I
you,
got tools. Here we go. Let me do tools.
tools.
We have tools. Okay.
Tools.
Here are mining tools. So let's start with needs. You remember Maslow, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may not remember exactly what the 4 human needs are, but there's 4 human needs in here, and then there's self-actualization on the top. Great. So Tony Robbins, the single biggest thing I got from his work is he took the 5 needs of Maslow and turned it into 6 needs. And that doesn't sound like much, but he changed the picture in a fundamental way. And what he said was that we have 3 pairs of needs, and the first 2 pairs, the human 4, are in tension with each other. So it's both that these needs are more important than these, and these are more important than these, that there's a hierarchy between levels, the way that Maslow called it out. But at each level, there's 2 competing values that are in tension with each other at these first 2 levels. Okay, so the first level is pleasure and variety, which is our survival needs. When you eat something, you feel pleasure. When you have sex, you feel pleasure. When you do things that create survival in this moment for you and the species, that's pleasure and variety. Okay, I've got the most bougie labradoodle on earth, and I keep changing her diet, and she's eating full human home-cooked food, but she gets bored of it, and she goes on hunger strikes or starts throwing up her food until I change her food to something new. Okay, so she's got a high variety need built into this one. Then that's in tension with safety. If you're in complete safety, you're in stasis, you're bored. Okay, my best friend from Berkeley was Slim, the crazy Australian base jumper, who became literally the world champion base jumper and died doing it. Extraordinary pleasure needs and variety needs, and lived life more fully in his time on this planet than just about anyone I've ever met. Very low safety. Okay, then we move to our social needs, and we have belonging and approval, our need to be part of the pack, with our need to be the leader of the pack. We need to be special and significant and achieve and climb to the top of the hierarchy, but we also need to be liked and connected to everyone. You can't do both at once. Okay, that is profound, and this is actually the root of human spiritual development. Competing values are root. They go all the way down to the bottom of everything. Okay, so the answer, according to Tony, is to work on moving up, get enough of these met, and then really focus on your top 2, growth and contribution. Deep truth, we took that as gospel for years, built all sorts of tools, ran with it, and what we found as we used this tool was it was missing a couple pieces. And so we added 2 things. First, on top, we realized that there were actually 2 more fulfillment needs: mature love and creativity. So there's actually 4 and 4. And then we realized on the bottom, there's actually 4 addictions. And if you look at them carefully, you'll notice 3 octaves. So here's our basic human needs. What is the best way to create safety in a business over time? Growth. Increasing profits. You're not going to have to lay anybody off if you're growing. Sustained growth. What's the worst way to do it? Try to cost cut and control and penny pinch every little thing. Okay, what's the highest form of pleasure that I've experienced? One of them, other than bliss, which is a little different, creativity, right? Which is closely tied to curiosity, right? That tone that you love so much, right? You've got a really high creativity need. Okay, that's a fantastic form of pleasure. A bad form of pleasure is an addiction where you have a craving where you start going for heroin. Okay, so this is classic 12 steps, is this set of 3 needs. Okay, control is like a master addiction. These are the two base addictions that human beings go to. And we try to go to control our environment, control everything around us. Okay. Then we move up to the next ones. Okay. A fantastic way of creating belonging and approval is mature love. A painful way of doing it that's highly addictive over time is conformance. Trying to be liked on Facebook. Okay. Special, this is the one we're talking about. Okay, this is the highest of the four basic needs in terms of if you were organized the back of Maslow. Okay, we all need to be special and achieve. Best way to do that is contribution, provide value. Compete over how much value you're creating in the world. On his saner days, this is what Elon Musk does. A bad way of doing it is trying to dominate people and show that you're better than they are. Okay, so most important mining tool here is, particularly on special, is be very aware of which octave your need is coming from. Call this upgrading your fuel source, because your needs are your core source of fuel.
Am I overthinking it by thinking there's a body, ego, and soul?
Yes, 100%. That's it. 3 octaves. Yep, 3 cells. That's exactly it. Okay, so if we look at now just special, okay, again, dominance, achievement, contribution. This is proving worth versus providing value. This is really addictive. This is unstable. You can't stay here. It's a stage.
It's out of your control as well, like a lot of the time.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first tool for mining your special, is upgrade it, shift from proving worth to providing value, be in the question of contribution. Right? If you look at your story from when you were occupying a desk on Wall Street and making money, and that was the primary question, how much worth do I have to the company? And that's measured by how much I get paid. Right? That was the success game. Nothing wrong with it. It's a stage of development. M. Scott Peck had this fantastic saying. It says, if you give up winning before you've won, you're the same thing that you started as, a loser. Okay? So you need to achieve so that then you can contribute. But you don't want to stay here.
Which is where 80% of my contemporaries are.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, accurate. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You're a huge fan of the hero's journey. Okay.
Monster. Yeah.
This is gonna be fun. I'm really curious to see how you're out with this one. Okay. So there are 4 things at the heart of shadow. Needs, which we just talked about. Repressed needs, which are root to who we are. Fear, pain, and judgment. So when we talk about healing shadow, those are the 4 things we most need to get to. Shame is a form of pain that's anchored in judgment. So it's a combo of those 2. Okay? So, and this is a little complicated of a picture, but the heart of the hero's journey, this archetypal upward spiral, right, is that there's a shadow component where you're going from not mine to me to mine, which is the heart of this death and rebirth, in parallel with growing your identity so you can hold space for more. Okay, so there's an expansion from the old self to the bigger self. That's the death and rebirth. That has to be paired. The reason why it's a downward and upward spiral is because you've got to go into the cave of shadow to find, you have to mine the shadow at the bottom of the loop to find the me that you become, that you heal and become mine.
And you're expanding because more of yourself is visible to you because you can see all the different ways you're tripping yourself up.
All of it. All of it. It all becomes a bigger, bigger, bigger piece. Yep.
But when people hear expansion, they might hear egoic expansion.
That's it.
Yes.
And spiritual expansion by itself is egoic expansion. Full stop.
Without integration, is your point.
Without integration.
So I always think about this in like the annoying way to do spirituality is by a hierarchy. And it's like, actually, how loving are you? Right? Like, because no one ever thinks like if someone who is actually more loving than you is trying to get dominance over you. It's like, actually how many more people can you love, and what is your capacity for love? That's to me like a stronger way of doing this. And you can't, like, one of the other members of our group wrote a fantastic piece recently about sending love to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that you can't send love to certain people who most represent your shadow.
Yes.
Like, you can't expand beyond
That's
those
it.
people. Because you're like, that guy really annoys me. And then if you think about it for even 15 seconds, you're like, oh, dude, that guy really annoys me because he represents something in me that I haven't acknowledged yet, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That is, so now that's exactly where we're going. So hold on to that thought. That's exactly it. Okay, so when that happens, you have an opportunity to heal shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And needs, these are deep, deep, deep truths here, okay? Needs cannot be controlled. They have to be upgraded. You have to go from dominance to achievement to contribution. You don't get rid of the need, okay? And so all of those top 4 needs are different flavors of loving. They're different flavors of purpose, okay? Fears cannot be conquered. This is actually one of the biggest mistakes in current psychology today. And I would say 99% of therapists, coaches, teachers have got this wrong. Okay. It's one of the deepest things, because I had so much fear. I had to keep chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing on it, and nothing I found worked. Okay. Fears cannot be conquered. They're not represented archetypally in the hero's journey story, right? There's the dragon you're slaying. Archetypally, the dragon is chaos, as Jordan Peterson would say. And then I would add the fear of chaos, right? Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death. Fear is that thing that I have to kill in order to be courageous. But there's 2 types of courage. There's the courage to conquer when you have an external enemy, and then there's the courage to change when it's your own shadow. Okay? And then you cannot kill your fear, just like you cannot kill your needs or your ego. You have to love them. Okay? So fears can't be conquered. They have to be partnered with. Right? This is I snuck this into Yes, Yes, Hell No. The stuff on making friends with your fears is revolutionary in its power. Okay? Pain is healed. This was the biggest thing I got from USM, these 2. This one in particular. Pain is healed by the application of loving to the places that hurt. So you've got your shadow, you've got your pain stored away in your shadow, right? And my root wound, as I mentioned, was my mom died when I was 3.5 years old, and I buried that wound away until I was 31 years old. Okay, and I had some other wounds, but that was literally the mother of all wounds. And so I did a lot of pain work. And pain is not a mental process. It is not even necessarily an emotional process. It's a spiritual chemical thing, where love is what creates the pain and love is what heals the pain. And so the pain is stored, it's buried inside in your shadow. You have to do the courageous work of going into the cave of darkness to reclaim the pain out of your unconscious mind, where it's being stored for later processing, later healing. And then you have to meet it with loving. Okay, the best therapists are really loving people who help hold a tone as you go into the cave and bring your pain out. The most powerful shadow healing groups, USM being the archetypal representation I found, create an incredibly loving community and loving spiritual energy that when the pain comes up into that room, it dissolves. Okay? You can't heal pain just with psychology. It doesn't work. The mind cannot heal the mind by itself. It is not a mental process. You also cannot heal pain only through spirituality, because you lift away from the pain. So you have to do the psychology depth work of finding the pain and pair it with the spiritual work of finding the loving. That's healing.
It reminds me of the Carl Jung image of the tree with the roots going to hell and the branches going to heaven. You have to have both, right?
Have both of them, and that's when healing happens, is to the both of them together. Okay? Judgment is one of the trickiest things, and USM did phenomenal stuff, and then there were some things that I still didn't quite work, and I think we've got it. I'm actually working on the book I'm working on right now, called Curian Stupidity. Lord help me, I hope it gets done sometime in the next decade. It's a process. But judgment is released through self-forgiveness, which is an internal self-forgiveness. It's an internal releasing of the mistake you made in buying into this old belief. It's a surrendering of something that no longer serves you. But you have to have learned from the failure first. So if your judgment is rooted usually in a failure caused to you by someone else, somebody else's failure caused trauma to you, or you failed in some way that caused trauma to other people, right? You hurt someone or were hurt by someone, and that's the root of judgment. That's trying to manage that process, okay? So we have moral wounds inside of us, and we have to learn the lesson, but it's not a mental lesson, it's a spiritual developmental process. So you have to do the developmental work to figure out what was the lesson I missed. How did that happen? How do I learn from this person's failure? How do I learn from my failure in a way that is in my body, not just in my mind? And then as you do that, you're able to release the judgments. And you find that you have less and less inner monologue. You have less and less inner energy disturbing your peace.
Makes sense.
Makes sense? Okay. So the big lie, healing is not an act of intelligence or will. It's a spiritual and psychological process, and it needs to be done in community. Now, that could be two people. It could be a therapist and a client, but it can be a full community doing deep work together. And the fundamental dynamic is it's very hard to hold the light and be in the darkness at the same time. It's not impossible. There are actually tools we learned at University of Santa Monica for how to do that. I've gotten fairly good at it over time. I can do it fairly consistently with myself now after 20 some years. But in general, particularly for the first 10 years of the journey, you're either in the darkness or you're holding the light. Choose one. When you were in depression, you needed someone else, such as your wife, to help hold the light for you. You had a whole community of people who helped hold faith and love for you while you were in your darkness.
Actually, I don't feel that worked. Like, I survived, but I felt that therapy and psychiatry in particular, actually, I was trying to find the night using a spotlight. I felt like I got actually no access to a shadow through that process because it was only ketamine infusions that allowed me to access something that was so traumatically repressed I couldn't get to. So when you think about who's holding the light for you, are you thinking about therapists? Who should people think about? Is it different for everyone?
So big question, right? I will say that much of modern psychology and psychiatry in particular tends to be all mind, no loving.
Right.
Right.
Very specifically no loving. They tell you not to have an attachment with your patient, right?
Right. It's anti-loving.
Yeah.
That does not work. You can't create healing because then the patient has to find the loving somewhere else to do the healing work.
Bingo.
Okay. So the best therapists, in fact, the only ones I would recommend people to, are highly loving people who are going to hold a loving space. It's a tone you can feel. Okay. Carl Rogers was the archetype of that. Okay. So there are many very good, very loving therapists. They tend to be more therapists than psychiatrists or psychologists in general. Okay. They tend to be much less focused on diagnosing and much more focused on holding space.
Yeah. Yeah, and indeed, when people ask me what I want for my community, I say I want a community that has love in it. It sounds hokey, but that's the only thing that is my first priority.
Yeah. Well, what is love? And that's a whole 10-hour conversation too. So it's not a simple little thing.
Yeah.
It's a big word. Okay. So hero's journey. This is the thing I think this will be fun for you. Okay. The most common way we start on the hero's journey is through what I call a beach ball. And a beach ball is a problem that you try to push underwater like a beach ball and it pops back up. Okay. And so you think it's a combination lock, you think it's something you can solve, or it's a bully that you need to stand up to. Those are what we call the test, bullies, and beach balls, or the three archetypal types of problems. And we're trained, particularly as highly successful, highly intelligent people, to treat everything as a combination lock, a test. And if it's not that, it must be a bully, a moral problem we have to stand up to. And we're never taught what to do about the beach balls. And the more you grow in leadership, particularly in companies or other organizations, the more that you find that higher and higher percentage of the problems on your desk are beach balls. And nobody's ever trained you in your MBA program on what to do with these, because they're not learning problems, they're not combination locks, they're developmental problems, they're actually invitations to the hero's journey. So a beach ball is the most common way that the hero's journey starts. Problem is, because we don't know what beach balls are and have never been trained how to work with them, that usually have to escalate into full-blown crisis before we pay attention. So we push the same problem underwater 100 times. You probably had issues of feeling empty with your work, like it wasn't fully on purpose for you, a few times before you crashed in 2017.
Yes. Well, what's funny is the single best thing I've ever read about midlife transitions is Brene Brown's The Midlife Unraveling. It's a 20-minute long article, but she basically describes exactly this dynamic where you get to a point where, as she puts it, your armor is preventing you from growing into your gifts.
Yep.
And you can't get around it because it is a failed coping mechanism that you need to address in order to grow. Like
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's the description. That's the archetypal start of the hero's journey for most people, and we fight it tooth and nail. We push that beach ball down as many times as we can until finally it blows up and we have to deal with it. Okay, so this is the standard archetypal form of the hero's journey. And the problem, the beach ball shows up as a dilemma, two bad choices where you don't have a positive option you can see. Because the hidden third choice requires a higher level of consciousness to see. Higher level of integration, not just ascension. So you actually have to grow yourself. You have to develop. You have to get outside the armor. You have to get past the failed coping mechanisms. You have to become a bigger, more integrated soul, person, thing, to find the hidden third choice. That's the boon. The boon is the discovery of a new structure of complexity that did not exist at this level. One of the biggest problems of coaching is you can't sell the solution to people because they literally can't see it.
Yes.
Right? All of marketing is based on selling solutions, the features and benefits of a solution. And developmental work is selling things that people by definition can't see until they do the work. Okay? So the answer, by the way, to that is you sell the diagnosis, not the solution. You slow down, help people diagnose their problem better. Okay? Second thing that invites people into the hero's journey is, and this is what you and I have been connecting over so much, is what we call relationship conflicts or flywheels. Okay? And the opportunity here is that, hey, maybe we could start the hero's journey before we hit full crisis. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Not to have to spend 5 years in depression. Let's be a little more proactive. So in intimate relationship, we find these loops build up. And there was this beautiful image in Good to Great of the flywheel, a huge stone wheel that holds energy, momentum. And you can add energy to it and it starts to spin. And it takes a long time to get going, but once it gets going, it has a life of its own. Okay. Deep emotional relationships have like this flywheel capacity where at first you can be really rude to the other person and they'll just absorb it. But they're not actually absorbing it, the flywheel's absorbing it. And then they'll do something that's inconsiderate, rude to you or hurtful, and the flywheel absorbs it. But over time, it builds up more and more energy, and it starts to hurt when you touch it. And so couples will become more and more anxious around each other, and there's more and more emotional conflict because they're paying debt and interest on the stored energy that they haven't dealt with. Okay. Now, what that looks like if we unpack it is a saying from University of Santa Monica. They nailed this. I'm upset because. In this case specifically, I am upset because of you. Okay. Now, if we unpack that, I am, the heart of I am is your needs and values, what matters most to you. Upset is your emotions, and becauses are judgments. This is the stuff in your shadow that you're not ready to look at yet, or the things you judge about yourself and others. So you'll do something, you'll say something that pokes the other person and gets the flywheel going, that basically bumps them against the flywheel. And they'll get angry because you just hurt them. Oh no, I'm upset because you did something. And this spirals. Okay, this is why more than half of marriages get divorced, is because nobody's taught how to unpack flywheels, because it's a developmental issue. It requires walking the hero's journey. Okay, this question of how do you find and heal your shadow, this is what USM nailed so profoundly. Was they said they discovered that the golden thread out of the maze of the Minotaur, how you escape the maze, is projection. That you go into the world, you get upset. You were describing this with your group. You try to send loving to somebody, and then you realize that that person pisses you off, and you can't send loving to them because you're really mad at them and judging them for something. I'm upset because you ... And that's your work right there, is to look in the mirror. That's the golden thread to start going into your shadow. Being in deep, committed, intimate relationships, one-on-one or groups of people, getting pissed off at each other, and then having the tools to own your emotions, own your judgments, own your needs, own your values, own everything in your shadow you're not wanting to look at, is the fastest path to shadow work I've ever seen. Emotional lab.
Maybe to make this tangible for people, because I've been reflecting on this a lot. The people that trigger me the most online are the people that are optimized for sounding smart, and they're talking all mouth and no heart. I can tell they're talking without integrity, but they take so much of their self-worth from sounding intelligent that they are incredibly good at it, and they gain huge followings as a result. And that triggers me so much, because that is fundamentally my failure mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I take an enormous amount of my self-worth from sounding smart, and that's why it's so triggering to me. And so, like, I've now realized that that's the thing that I actually need to address. And it's also even worse. Like, I think it's a really common dynamic in this area, where basically, like, that's you intellectualizing all this spirituality by talking about it without embodying it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, you go back to Lao Tzu and the saying, those who know of what the Tao is don't speak, those who speak don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not 100% true, but it in general, if we're spending a lot of time intellectualizing, there's probably inner work to be doing. So great awareness. That's you owning your projection. That's exactly it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how.
But notice, it's not all or nothing. It's not that you don't get triggered. It's not that you don't go into your old failure mode. It's not that you don't fall in that pit anymore. It's that when you fall in that pit, you notice you're in the pit and you have ways of getting out of the pit. And every time you get out of that particular pit, you like dump a carton of dirt back into it, and you fill it up just a little bit.
Yeah. It feels that way.
Yeah. And it is so frustrating to be in the pit for the 1,000th time. And it's like, okay, I saw the pit coming. I've actually been watching myself walk into it for about 3 minutes now. This is really going to hurt. Yep. Wow, that hurts really badly. Here we go again. And that's progress, as frustrating as it is. Okay, so my book, that is a deceptively subversive book. It looks so simple and innocent, but it's naughty in how if you actually follow that book, it's sneaky. Okay, because it upturns a lot of assumptions without telling you what it's doing. Okay, so inspired goals, what we call leaps of faith, yes, hell no goals, where your soul, your intuition is pulling you forward. Your mind is at least checking it out and say it's not crazy. You're not jumping off a physical cliff. And your body, your fear, is shouting, yes, hell no, run away, that's scary, that's deep change. Okay? That is the most positive, exciting way to engage the hero's journey, because there is a dirty little secret buried underneath that book, which I do not tell anybody, which is the fastest path to any inspired and scary goal involves transformational change. Anybody who starts taking yes as hell no leaps of faith on a regular basis will get pulled into the hero's journey. But the good news is you can do little tiny ones. It doesn't become this all or nothing. The hero's journey is held up as this overwhelmingly terrifying crisis, which is what it has historically been, because we wouldn't go into it consciously because it's so overwhelmingly terrifying. The opportunity is, how do we embrace it every day? How do we do 10 leaps of faith a day? Little ones, rather than one big 5-year depression.
Yeah. And in fairness, the way I like to see it is kind of being fractal, that like the hero's journey just reflects when there's something you don't know, right?
Yes.
There's something that you can't see that needs to be integrated into your model. And that happens 5 times an hour. And then if you let it fester, it can happen one really big time in your life, you know?
That's it. That's it. That's exactly it. So here's the stoplight of hero's journey. We can wait for the crisis, wait for things to get really bad, in which case there's a big ass dilemma plus a really nasty vicious cycle coming together. And that's what we've been unpacking here today, is the way that this pattern around spiritual pride and repressed special tends to be this beach ball that blows up for people in our space over and over and over again. But we don't have to wait. We want to catch these, we want to get ahead of these, but we also can mine our relationships. How do we get into deep, intimate relationships where we piss each other off and own those projections? And then, hey, let's have some fun. Let's go on some adventures consciously, where we get a band of adventurers and say, let's take on an exciting and scary and aligned goal.
Which speaks to the purpose of why I'm doing any of this, which is basically to try and reduce unnecessary suffering. Right, like people try and I don't want people to shortcut the spiritual process, but you can stay in those loops for a really long period of time.
Yeah. Yep. That's it. So last 2 slides.
Mm-hmm.
So ego mountain. We start with success mountain. But I had this vision of success mountain where you climb the mountain, then you're looking for the second mountain, right? And we tend to make consciousness the second mountain and compete spiritually. Okay. So ego mountain. The whole point of life is to build an ego and then put it in service. You don't get rid of it, you use it. It becomes the emissary, not the master. So success is the part of the mountain where the ego is the master, and it's supposed to be. Okay? Then at some point, the trap is that you keep on trying to do the same thing once you've climbed the mountain. And this is a lot of my clients, and they've won the game, and the finish line was 10 years ago, and they can't even hear the crowd cheering for them anymore. They're way up here somewhere. Instead, you want to start going down the mountain of ego identification, which doesn't mean you're getting rid of your ego. It means that you're putting it in service, which is what you're doing through community.
Yeah, and then again, it fits in the Gilchrist model of right hemisphere of the left, which is the hero's journey inversion as well. Beautiful. Yep,
exactly. Okay, and then the last thing is, and this is one of the deepest things I've found in all these years. Hey, we started with the 2 bad choices that started the hero's journey of up the stakes or up your consciousness. You get to the place where success starts feeling empty, which is so many people in our society today. We're starting to hit a post-scarcity society where we've accomplished enough, right? And then what do? And we either up the stakes or which is all of the noise around AI and the singularity and like you were part of that community you were saying of the new atheists and the techno-utopians and everything. And it's just drama. It's trying to keep Success Mountain going after they've won the game, okay? After it's time to change direction, right? Or we see so much in our spiritual community of trying to compete over consciousness and take a cliff dive into that world and all the dangers that come with that, okay? So the third choice here is find and commit to an adequate container. Because it is difficult to wake up with integrity on your own. And if you're really smart and if you're really successful, in many ways, it's even harder to wake up with integrity on your own. And so this is what I think your core calling is, and it's mine as well, is the question. I don't claim to have all the answers for it, but that question of, okay, how do we build adequate containers, right? And like reading your story, so much of the pain for me of reading your story was like, no, that was malpractice. What that person did with you was painfully wrong. Again, like you stumbled from painful choice to painful choice, wandering in the desert for years, and everyone had the best intentions, right? Everyone was doing their best, very smart, very successful people, but there wasn't an adequate understanding of what was really happening and how to work with it.
But then I think that's not a coincidence that both you and I feel this need that the container is the solution, getting people to see value in containers. The reason I charge people membership for the leading edge is because I want people to put value on the container itself, which I think is a next stage of capitalism, to be quite honest. And that's a different discussion.
Okay, we got to do one last slide then, because that's so spot on. Okay, and this was probably the single most important thing about coaching and transformational work, the business of it. Called I think we did this on the beach.
Yeah.
The 10-30-60 model.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I've been repeating that ever since. Yeah.
Okay. So 10% of the value you can create in helping hold space for people on their journeys, whether it's a coach, a healer, a counselor, a spiritual teacher, any form, comes from what you do with them. The modalities, the tools, the things you do. That isn't to diminish those. They're very important. They're foundational. They're non-negotiables. But they're the least scalable piece, let's call it. Okay, 30% comes from your presence, from the energetic space you hold, right? 60%, the biggest piece, comes from client commitment, right? I say that if you have a client who's 100% committed to changing, and you hold a profoundly loving energy, you could almost read the phone book to them and they'll transform. And in our society, this is the truth that you're getting there. The easiest way to commit, not the only way, marriage, by the way, is a phenomenal commitment vehicle. That's its one of its primary purposes, is it's a commitment to relationship, okay, and to the change that happens in a good relationship. Okay? But in a non-married relationship, the easiest way to commit in our society is with money. And it's an energetic, it's not just people talk about energetic exchanges and no, it's putting your money where your mouth is in a way that commits you fully to what you say you want. And when that meets a qualified container, and that's the problem, you've got to have a balance of qualification and commitment. You've got to balance those two together. When you do those things together, that's when miracles happen.
And just reflecting back, I think there's an obvious lateral here, which is, there's another guest in our series that we'll talk about, but she was talking about how sitting with the sensations in her body allowed her to make her container larger, that she became aware of more parts of her body, as it were. And as a result, she could hold more space for clients. So in a way, it was that her container became more loving, and therefore she could do better work for clients. And it seems
100%.
to me that like cleaning up shadow is central to this work.
Yeah, so there's one more step in there, I'm assuming. Step one was pay attention to your body.
Yeah.
Step two was trace that into your shadow.
Yes.
And do the healing work on the shadow. And then step three is have more space you can hold.
Yeah.
100%. So relationship is one of the primary invitation paths, the golden threads into shadow. Embodiment can also be a golden thread into shadow as well. Leadership can be. There are many threads in, and that's a fantastic one.
Amazing. I believe we're about to go Joe Rogan length, and I
yes,
I am gonna have to listen to this podcast already. Like I feel like I'm gonna have to listen to it 4 times to extract all the value from it. Any last words?
Nah, just I adore you and what you're doing, and I'm grateful to be in relationship with you.
Me too. This has been so fantastic. I'd remind listeners that Yes, Yes, Hell No is available from all good bookshops. I read it and loved it. Brian is a spectacular person, and I can't wait to do more with you in future. Thank you.
Sounds good. All my best.